Hello, welcome to the Malarium's first video. Today I'm going to be going over Terence's Adelphoe, the first 39 lines of the first scene of the first act. I'm skipping the prologue because the prologue is not pertinent to the narrative of this particular play, and actually a lot of Terence's plays that I'm aware of the prologues don't contribute to the story. So we're going to skip that. We're just going to go right into the first act. And I'm going to walk you through kind of a translation of this first 39 lines. They're an interesting first 39 lines. That's kind of why I chose them. I don't plan on going through this entire play unless for some reason the people demand it or something. But I do want to talk a little bit about kind of some of the idiosyncrasies of comic poetry and some interesting things that we find in these lines in particular, talking about elision and the meter of the comic playwrights and Scansion a little bit. So I'm gonna kind of touch on a bunch of different things. Hopefully this video isn't too long. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I'll give you just a basic plot overview really quick. So the first speaker here his name is Mikio. Mikio has a brother whose name is shoot, I'm gonna forget his name. His name is Demea. Demea is his brother. Demea had two children. Two sons. One's name is Aeschylus, one's name is Ctesippho. For whatever reason, and I don't believe the book goes into this or the play gets into this, but Demea gives away Aeschylus as a son to Mikio, who doesn't have any children. He doesn't have a wife. Demea does have a wife. He's married. And he gives Aeschylus to Mikio as like an adoptive son. And Mikio raises Aeschylus, Demea raises Ctesippho, and it's sort of a story of the two different, they represent the two different poles of parenting. So you have Mikio, the really overly nice and lenient parent, and then you have Demea, who's the overly stern and harsh parent. And we get to see the products of that kind of education in the two children. Aeschylus, who's the son of the lenient parent, and then Ctesippho, who's the son of the more strict Demea. And we see here Mikio is opening in the first scene. He's complaining about the fact that he can't find his son Aeschylus. And it just gives us some interesting insight into sort of the kind of the headspace of Mikio and what his character is like when he's not talking to other people. He's just talking to himself here. Unless he's narrating it to this guy, Storax, it's kind of unclear. That's another thing that's one quick thing about comedy. Well, these plays in general is when they were written to be performed on a stage, and a lot of the communication that we would have received would have been through like stage direction and stage action. And not everything is conveyed in speech, unlike the normal like prose writings that we'll be reading of in Latin literature, of say Cicero or something. Well, actually, even in Cicero, there are certain things like in his oratorical works. Not everything that he's communicating is being communicated through the words he's saying. There's a lot of like acting going on, and in a play in particular, there's more than what would be going on in like a in an oratorical delivery. So it's sometimes there's a little bit of interpretation. It's kind of hard to tell. That's what makes these plays a little bit more challenging to read. And I think maybe that's contributed to perhaps part of the reason why these plays are read less often than they used to be. That being said, the language, I think you'll find a lot of the grammar is pretty rudimentary. Like there's nothing lofty about the language of comedy, unlike the language of tragedy, of which we don't possess very much Roman tragedy. So it stays pretty humble and easy to follow along, as long as you understand sort of the stage direction. And some editions of books will give you that stage direction to kind of help you follow along. I don't have any of that here. So we have to interpret a little bit. I think Storax, he's calling for Storax, is one of his servants, and then he sort of continues on talking to himself. So we get into the mind of Mikio, the lenient father here. His son Aeschylus has apparently gone to dinner and not returned. So that's where we're starting. And before I get into reading this, I want to talk just a second about the meter of comedy in general, but of this scene in particular. So the normal, if you're a student of Latin, the normal meter that you're probably used to is the epic meter or the dactylic hexameter, which is composed of 6 dactyls, hence the name dactylic hexameter, hex for 6. And dactylic hexameter does not mean that the line contains 6 dactyls, even though that's kind of how we talk about it. In fact, at least in Latin poetry, you're almost never going to have 6 dactyls. In fact, it's almost impossible because of that 5th line. Well, the 5th line will be a dactyl, but the 5th foot will be a dactyl, but the 6th foot must be a spondy by the normal rules of dactylic hexameter. Virgil does break that rule sometimes, like he doesn't follow it 100%, either because he's doing something to draw our attention to some aspect of what he's doing, or he didn't have enough time to correct it. Sometimes it's hard to tell. The language of comedy, or the meter of comedy, is quite a bit different. So what's nice about the epic poetry of Virgil is that it's nice and strict and regimented and consistent. So we get the da 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 da, and it doesn't really stray too much from that, those constraints. The meter of comedy feels much looser, and it is much looser because the variance in the meter is so wide. So the normal meter, or I should say the most common form of meter in Terence and in Plautus as well, is what's called the Iambic Senarii, meaning 6 iambs. An iamb being a short followed by a long. I'll go ahead and draw one of these, do my best here. So an iamb is a short followed by a long, that's an iamb. And I suppose in the perfect archetypal form of this meter, you would have 6 consistent iambs. No line that I'm aware of in this play. I'm sure it has happened or it exists, but normally you're not going to have 6 iambs in a line. Those iambs can be changed out for different feet, just like in dactylic hexameter. However, the array, we have a much wider array of feet we can choose from, or that the poet can choose from to supply or to swap in with. So we can have an iamb as a foot, and then any one of the iambs in the line can be replaced with, I think 6. There's 6 other feet we can replace it with. So we can replace an iamb with a dactyl, which is a long followed by 2 shorts, long, short, short. We can replace an iamb with an anapest, which is 2 shorts and a long. The word anapest is an anapest, short, short, long. We can replace an iamb with a spondy, which is 2 longs, just like in the epic meter. We can replace an iamb with this is called a pyrrhic, I think is how you pronounce it, 2 shorts. Or with 3 shorts, and this is called a tribrach, or tribrach. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And then the final one we could potentially use, I'll divide this. We can also have 4 shorts. 1, 2, 3, sorry about this, not looking very good. And 4. And this, the name of this is hard to pronounce. I think it's called a proclusmatic or something like that. This one is not nearly as often as, it doesn't occur nearly as often as these other ones here. So in a line of Iambic Senarii, or an Iambic Senarius, is 6 iambs, and then any one of those iambs can be replaced with any of these other kinds of feet. Now that's going to seem pretty weird if the only poetry you've ever encountered is the epic meter. And when you read this, it almost sounds like it doesn't have meter. And I think that's part of the point. The parts of the play that include Iambic Senarii are supposed to, I believe, kind of have a more colloquial tone to them, and so they're not going to sound as constrained. The iamb being kind of like the normal, the normal like talking rhythm, short followed by a long, or speaking rhythm. Not every single part of the comic plays are Iambic Senarii. In fact, it changes, quite a bit. In the next act, for example, I believe the meter changes to what's called trochaic octonarii, which would be, in the perfect meter, it would be 8 trochees. A trochee being a long followed by a short, and hopefully that's clear. This is a trochee over here. This is actually not accepted. This is not an acceptable foot in Iambic Senarii, interesting enough. That's interesting to me because it seems like it would be pretty hard to hear, whether or not we had a trochee in a line. And, based on some things that I've read, the Roman ear was so attentive to some of this poetry that if you messed up the line in an expected meter, if you didn't put the correct feet or have the correct feet, you would potentially even be booed off stage. And so there was a lot of pressure too on the actors to make sure that they were being clear and enunciating correctly so that they didn't get booed off stage. So let's go ahead and I'll parse I'll scan this first line here. I don't think I'll scan any of the other lines, but they do vary. Because we have so many different options for feet, the lines are going to vary, a lot. So I'll try to do this kind of quick. I'm not going to talk about what I'm doing. If you would like kind of more of an explanation of how to scan poetry, maybe that can be a video we can do in the future. Then we have short, long, 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 short, long. Okay. I'll draw the feet out so we can see them. Sorry, it's not very clean, but I think we can see that. So this first line is an iamb, and then we get a dactyl next. Then we get another iamb, spondy, spondy, iamb. I forgot to mention the final foot of a line in Iambic Senarii must be an iamb, or it could be this pyrrhic here as well. And we'll see that, I think, maybe in one of these lines. Oh, male is a pyrrhic there. Okay, so I'm gonna read this first line, and then I'll stop and talk for just a second, and then I'll go ahead and read the whole thing, and then we'll jump into the translation. Storax, non redi tak nok da kain aiskinos. So you can kind of hear, I think in this first line in particular, and especially because I've drawn it up here, you can kind of hear the meter, but to my ear, I wouldn't be able to tell in the moment if I heard, a trochee. I don't think so, or any other potential combination of illegal combination of feet. I don't know if I'd be able to hear that, but I do think that this one in particular is clear. There was one elision, just one elision here, because this word kena ended with a vowel, and the next word starts with a vowel, and actually it's a diphthong. So we're not going to pronounce the A in kena, and we're just going to jump right over into aiskinos here. So this is nokta kain aiskinos. Elision is a very frequent occurrence in comic poetry. There are times when you might elide several times in a line, and you might potentially elide for several lines in a row. For example, down here, this line right here, you'll see, I'll pronounce it here in a minute, almost every single word is elided. So yeah, here, here, here. Yeah, that's a lot of elision. So that kind of thing is much more common in the comic poetry than it is in epic poetry. And you'll see, I'll do my best to catch all the elision. I might I might miss one or mispronounce something. So hopefully, I'll do my best to stay attentive there.